welcome to Between Sessions. It's been a little while, so we've got a lot to talk about in the next couple sessions. Today, though, we wanted to talk about something that's been going on a lot here in the state of Oklahoma, and I'm sure probably nationally too, is just looking at some coding. Today, we're going to talk, Kelly and I are going to talk a little bit about some coding challenges and modifier challenges that we've had a little bit specific here in Oklahoma, but we know this is something that we need to be aware of and know about no matter what state you're in. So we thought it might just be good to have some little discussion around billing, coding, our ethical responsibility, and what we shouldn't do today.
Right. And as serving both as therapists and as manager, supervisor, employers, there's different perspectives to have on both sides of the issue there as well. And then in a day and age where things are really changing in the insurance world and, tightening those purse strings and both sides of things, it's audits come up frequently as well. And right now, it's not a matter of if you will be audited, but when you will be audited. So these are really great things to know, at any point in any position you are in your practice.
So we're going to go just through some things, like some main points that we want to talk about in the session today. We've got around about 4 different points we're going to focus on, but Kelly, I'm just going to shoot some to you and kind of let me know what you think. So I think the number one, or one of the first things, is we've had new therapists come in and out of our practice, and not having any idea about what their numbers are, their own MPI, their own insurance credentials. So Kelly, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I can understand it from both sides as a therapist and as, like I said, employer manager, whatever role I'm playing. But I think what we have to remember in all of this is that when we're working with therapists, ultimately their responsibility is to the contracts that they sign. So that NPI number is a personal identifier. So they should always know their personal identifier. I know a lot of big companies have a credentialing department, and they might not be sharing that information with their therapists, but really it should be shared with their therapists. Our therapists should all have access to their NPI number, their provider numbers, their credentialing numbers with whatever private insurance it is, because the name on the contract ultimately is theirs.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's something that should be easily accessible, if not given directly to the provider.
So make sure you know your numbers. Number 2, and like I said earlier, we've had different therapists come to us, and we've had some therapists not know as much as they should about diagnosis code, ICD codes, CPT codes, modifiers. So what do you, like, Kelly, come from the role of maybe a manager and a therapist on the importance of knowing those codes, those diagnosis, treatment codes, and your modifiers?
Well, as you know, I like to nerd out to the code of ethics quite often.
Yes, she does.
And I think that's one really important thing that all therapists at that provider level should know, is that within the code of ethics, all of them, PT, OT, speech, say that you are ultimately responsible for appropriate coding and billing. So if that's not something that you feel really confident in, going and making sure that that's a part of those continuing education courses that you're taking in this year, make it a priority, especially if you're in any kind of private practice or outpatient setting. Diagnosis code, you need to know what that is being put on your paperwork. I know a lot of companies, they will take it from the physician's referral, but we're expected to, at that point, agree or disagree or point to the appropriate ICD code at that point. And then when it comes to CPT, with EMRs, it's we were just talking to one of our therapists. It was at her previous employer. It was a lot of point and click. I did an assessment. I did a treatment. But there's a lot of different codes. Yeah. For OT, for PT, for speech, when it comes to eval. There's a lot of different codes when it comes to treatment. So you need to know what those codes are, again, because your code of ethics says, and a lot of your different employment contracts and things like that will say that ultimately you individually are responsible for the appropriate coding and billing. So you really have to understand that at the end of the day, that is your responsibility. And that's something that we as employers really try to give a lot of that back to our therapists. I think sometimes they might think, oh, we're having to do more than my colleagues out in the field are. We're giving a lot of that responsibility over because we want, at the end of the day, you to have that say in it. I don't want somebody outside of your session to get a say in whatever code, whether that's ICD or CPT.
And that's what we went to
It's being
school
put-
for, right? We went to
right.
school to know our codes and to know what we're doing and how we're billing. And okay, so number 3. So number 1 was know your numbers. Number 2, know your codes. Number 3 is documentation to support what you're doing.
Okay, so the only thing I might love better than the code of ethics
Is
is
documentation.
It's really, it's sad. But if you don't know the code you're billing, you're not going to know exactly what needs to be within your documentation to support the code. So I know as a speech pathologist, we have a lot of different eval codes. We have eval codes that are for language only, that are for speech only, that are for voice, that are for speech and language. All of that information needs to be able to support that code that you build. So it's really important in that. And then when you go into therapy codes, same thing happens. We have different codes for therapy of feeding and swallowing, different codes for the language, different codes for AAC. So if you don't know the codes you're billing, you're not going to know how your documentation should support it. We have great courses about this.
Yeah,
we have courses that reflect how your documentation should be supported according to the code of ethics. We have courses available for managers and supervisors about onboarding your therapist. We don't always have a lot of time to talk about that. If therapists came from another place, a lot of times I know we assume, oh, they probably got this, they've worked somewhere else. And then we're picking that up as we go. So just remembering to check those.
Check our website.
Yeah.
So the last thing is knowing, and I know this is something that I'm not always great at. Kelly's a lot better at this than I am, is really advocating and using your national organizations. So advocating for when you believe, codes need to be updated, or pricing, or just more information to certain payers about codes, using those national organizations. I know you've had a lot of experience recently.
I have had a lot of experience recently with talking to ASHA, our Speech and Hearing Association, just about, am I on the right track with this code? Doesn't mean what I think it means. There's so many updates that the CPT code manual gets updated frequently. So just making sure that, if you're paying dues to those national associations, part of them are to be able to access those great resources at AOTA, APTA, and ASHA to be able to know better. So I find myself, if I'm spending more than 10-15 minutes to try to research that, even on their website, I'm reaching out and using the Contact Us feature on all of those websites to get the support from those national organizations.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. Remember the 4 points: know your numbers, your MPI numbers, your insured, who you're credentialed with, know the diagnosis, ICD, CPT modifiers, document to support those, and then also using those national organizations that you're already paying for. Check out our website. We've got some different courses that go along with this. And thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.